Many owners still feed their pets dry food every day, not knowing that the key to more health, vitality, and longevity may lie in a raw, simple, and natural diet. In this video, you'll find out how to start the transition from ultra-processed to BARF in minutes, safely and effectively, even if you've never tried it before. Watch until the end, because when you understand what your pet really needs, everything changes, including the time he will spend with you. Subscribe to the channel for more videos on animal health and nutrition based on science, practice, and love for pets. For years, feeding dogs and cats dry kibble was considered the standard of care. Practical, cheap, and with long shelf lives, the food dominated homes with promises of balanced nutrition in each kibble. But behind the convenience, there is a question that more and more tutors have been asking. Is this really the best for my pet's health? That's how the movement towards BARF began, an acronym that, for many, still sounds strange, but which is transforming the way we think about pet food. BARF stands for Biologically Appropriate Raw Food Portuguese. More than a diet, it is a philosophy of nutrition based on offering the animal what it was evolutionarily made to eat. But how to get out of dry food and take this step without harming the dog's or cat's body? And how can this be done safely in a few minutes? The transition to BARF is not a blind leap. It is an adjustment that respects the animal's digestive system, feeding behavior, and even life history. First of all, it is necessary to understand the impact that years of ultra-processed food cause. Dry food, when going through high temperatures, loses a good part of its natural nutrients. To compensate, it receives synthetic additives, dyes, and preservatives. What keeps the shape and smell can be the same that, over time, wears down the intestinal tract, generates silent inflammation, and harms the immune system. It is at this point that many owners begin to notice the signs: constant itching, hair loss for no apparent reason, dry or pasty stools, strong breath, and recurrent episodes of foamy vomiting. When this happens, the problem is rarely in the brand of the feed, but rather in the very concept of dehydrated and chemically modified feed. The first step in the smooth transition to BARF begins with the introduction of complementary fresh feed, still mixed into the feed. The ideal is to start with simple and safe ingredients: cooked pieces of pumpkin, well-mashed carrots, peeled and seedless apples, or small portions of cooked and shredded chicken. This phase, which can last between 3 to 5 days, aims to reawaken the animal's natural appetite, stimulate the intestinal flora, and observe allergic or digestive reactions. Many owners are afraid of raw meat, especially for contamination reasons. But when a safe hygiene and freezing protocol is adopted, with meat purchased from reliable suppliers, frozen for at least 5 days at minus 18 degrees, the risks are efficiently controlled. Dogs, for example, have an acidic digestive system with a pH between 1 and 2, which is naturally prepared to deal with bacteria present in raw food. In cats, the metabolism requires extra attention to the amount of taurine and the presence of adequate fats, which are often lacking in the dry versions of industrialized foods. After the introduction of fresh food, the phase of gradual substitution begins. The feed is gradually reduced, and one raw meal a day is introduced. That meal should contain at least 70% lean raw meat, about 10% raw fleshy bones, 5% raw liver, 5% other organs, and the remainder with crushed vegetables such as spinach, zucchini, and kale. Contrary to what many people think, BARF feeding does not have to be expensive or complex. There are now options for ready-made frozen kits, which are already balanced with the necessary nutrients. But it is also possible to set up at home, with the guidance of a veterinarian nutritionist, a weekly menu that respects the weight, age, and activity level of the animal. The secret of the transition in minutes is not to speed up the process, but to prepare each step well, observing the reactions of the animal's body. In many cases, the body itself responds quickly. Feces with a less intense odor, greater willingness to play, reduction of itching, and visible improvement in the coat in the first few days. More than a fad, BARF represents a return to instinct, and with it, to health. But it is essential that this path is followed with awareness, respect for the needs of each species, and especially with professional monitoring. Because what seems like just food can actually be the key to extra years of vitality with your pet. And while many still wonder if it's worth changing, others have already realized that the answer was on the plate. All along, many owners start the transition with enthusiasm, but face an unexpected obstacle: the animal's addicted palate. Just as we have become accustomed to sugar, dogs and cats can develop an artificial preference for the flavorings and flavor enhancers present in dry food. That's why, even in the face of fresh food, some animals refuse or smell suspiciously. This behavior is not a rejection of the food itself, but the absence of the additives to which they have been conditioned. Therefore, the second most important step in the transition is to rescue the natural appetite. An effective technique is to use homemade chicken or beef broths, always without salt, onion, or spices, lightly heated and poured over raw food. The smell of the broth helps stimulate interest and prepares the body to better digest fresh proteins. Ideally, the tutor should maintain this stimulus for at least 5 consecutive days, always offering food at the same time in a quiet environment, and with the animal fasting for at least 3 hours. At this point, a frequent question arises: what if the pet vomits or has mild diarrhea? In many cases, the body is just adapting. The intestine, previously accustomed to dry food rich in simple carbohydrates, undergoes a process of modulation of the microbiota. That is, intestinal bacteria reorganize themselves to deal with the new type of digestion. This is why a period of softer stools can be normal. However, if the symptoms are intense or last more than 3 days, it is necessary to review the proportions or temporarily stop the introduction of raw meat. Another delicate point: bones. Contrary to what many imagine, dogs and cats not only can but should consume raw bones, as long as they are fleshy and suitable for the size of the animal. Cooked bones, on the other hand, are extremely dangerous. When cooked, they lose elasticity and can fragment into sharp splinters, causing internal perforations. Therefore, if the owner is afraid to offer bones, he can replace the portion with edible bone meal or calcium-rich supplements, as long as they are prescribed by a specialist. In the case of cats, the transition may require even more patience. More selective animals, felines have an eating behavior marked by neophobia, fear of new foods. For this reason, it is recommended to start with microportions, mixed with the usual food, respecting the cat's time and avoiding forcing. Flavoring the meat with a little of the smell of the food itself or slightly heating the food are strategies that usually work. In addition, it is essential to ensure that the diet is rich in taurine, an amino acid vital for the heart and neurological health of cats, found mainly in raw chicken heart and fresh beef liver. In both cases, dogs or cats, the smooth transition can be made in 3 simple phases. 1. Sensory adaptation phase, presentation of broths, light vegetables and small amounts of cooked meats. 2. Controlled introduction phase, a meal of the day with BARF, starting with lean meats and crushed bones. 3. Complete replacement phase, gradual withdrawal of the feed, maintaining balanced raw meals with veterinary supervision. And the result of this is not just aesthetic. Several recent veterinary studies have already shown that dogs and cats fed a balanced raw diet have better immunity, lower incidence of allergies, greater longevity, and more balanced behavior. An example of this is the study published in the Journal of Animal Physiology and Animal Nutrition, which showed that animals fed BARF for more than 3 months showed a significant increase in white blood cells and a better inflammatory response to common infections. The tutor who starts this journey needs one virtue above all: observation. More than following a formula, the important thing is to notice how the animal reacts. If it is more active, more willing, if it drinks less water, which is common since raw foods have high humidity, or if it shows signs of discomfort. One of the biggest mistakes in transitioning to BARF is wanting to rush the process or copy exactly the diet of another animal. Each pet has its metabolism, its clinical history, its intolerances and preferences. And that's why BARF is not a single recipe, but a principle of living adaptable and respectful nutrition. At the end of this transition phase, many tutors report an emblematic moment. The animal begins to approach the food calmly, smells, chews slowly, licks the plate to the end, and instead of panting or sleepy, remains active and attentive. This behavior isn't just digestive, it's instinctive. It is the manifestation of an organism that is finally being treated as it should, for what it is, and not for what is convenient for the industry. And when that happens, health is no longer a goal, and it becomes routine. When the transition to BARF is made with attention and consistency, not only the animal's body transforms, but also the bond between tutor and pet. This is because when preparing food with their own hands or choosing each ingredient with purpose, the tutor starts to see the act of feeding not as an automatic obligation, but as a gesture of real, daily, conscious care. And it is at this point that the routine is redefined. The moment of the meal is no longer rushed, the pot is no longer just a container of repetitive dry food. And the animal's gaze, as it approaches the plate, is no longer one of distrust or boredom, but of anticipation, curiosity, and reactivated instinct. However, even after the complete transition, there are fundamental precautions to maintain balance and avoid setbacks. The first of them is with the storage of raw food. Meats should be kept frozen in small portions, thawed slowly in the refrigerator, and served at room temperature. You should never use a microwave or hot water to speed up the process, as this compromises the nutritional structure of the protein and can alter the pH of the meal. In addition, it is essential to maintain the rotation of ingredients. Avoid always offering the same type of meat, the same vegetables, or the same type of bone. This variety not only prevents nutritional deficiencies, but also keeps the immune system active and adaptable. A good BARF menu usually includes chicken, beef, pork, when possible and well sanitized. Lamb, fish such as sardines, liver, heart, kidneys, as well as crushed raw vegetables such as pumpkin, beets, broccoli, and dark leaves in small quantities. Another essential point is strategic supplementation, which should be done only when necessary and with professional guidance. Raw eggs with yolk and white are excellent sources of biotin and protein. Fish oil, rich in omega-3, helps with skin and joint health. Raw apple cider vinegar in very small doses can promote digestion. But all this should only be introduced after a complete adaptation phase and with veterinary control. And even with all these precautions, the question remains for many tutors, is it really worth changing? The answer, although individual, is usually visible. Animals that used to sleep in excess start to play frequently. Breathing becomes calmer. The smell of the body and feces decreases. The visit to the veterinarian, which used to be monthly due to allergies or recurrent infections, becomes sporadic. And the twinkle in the animal's eyes seems to say something that no artificial formula can replicate. This is what my body understands as food. Of course, there are cases where BARF needs to be adapted. Dogs and cats with chronic kidney disease, severe allergies, or liver problems require specific protocols. But even in these cases, it is possible to use the principle of natural food to create a safe, respectful, and more nutritious plan than common food. Today, with the advancement of veterinary medicine and access to quality information, the tutor no longer has to choose between practicality and health. The market offers ready-to-use frozen BARF kits, personalized menus with online support, consultations with veterinary nutritionists, and even weekly delivery of fresh portions for the pet. The transition, which once seemed challenging, can happen gradually, safely, and surprisingly quickly. The most difficult thing for many is not to change the pet's plate. It is to change the look. It is to recognize that behind each colorful kibble there is a chain of processes that does not always prioritize animal welfare. And that, by returning to the basics, the fresh, the instinctive, we are offering not only more health, but more time, more vitality, more connection. Because at the end of the day, the food we give our animals says a lot about how we want to live with them. And if we can choose a more natural, more conscious, and more loving path, why not start today? This is not a fad. It is a silent revolution, which starts on the plate, but transforms the whole life.